Thanks, John, for having me. This is awesome. And thank you for waking up so early. I feel like I kind of have to, like, you know, get the blood flowing. So I had something planned, and then I was thinking about the theme this morning of bravery. And I'm like, let's just do something different. So this might be a total disaster, but like I think of bravery, I think of courage. And I think of like all of the ways in which like the things that I'm utterly terrified of. I'm enormously shy. I have a hard time, just going up to the random person and like introducing myself, which is like an awful thing when you're the founder and CEO of a company that's about helping people build relationships. But I'm lucky in that I have some like really great folks, Josh Grahammer here and Joe Conti, who are like just embody that, like they will talk to everyone and anyone, and they probably have already talked to you. So I thought maybe I would kind of try to unpack, like, where does bravery, where does courage come from? Because I see there's moments in my life where it's there, there's moments where it's not, and so how does that happen? When I was a teenager, I started having problems breathing. And when you're a teenager, right, you go to a doctor and they say, oh, it's bronchitis, right? You need to like take some pills and you take some medicine, and it kind of just kept getting worse. Whenever I would lie down, I couldn't breathe. I would try to have to sit up, and so I couldn't sleep at night. I would have to sit in a chair, and it got worse and worse to the point where finally the doctor sent me to get an X-ray. And they found 4 liters of fluid around my lungs. And so what was happening was, whenever I would lie down, the fluid would sort of go up into my lungs, and I would sort of start choking. I couldn't breathe. The question, of course, was like, why was that fluid all there? And so that led to a whole bunch of stuff. I was in the hospital. The doctor came. My parents were there. I was sitting in the hospital bed. And they were trying to sort of figure out what was going on after they had sort of pulled all the stuff, these giant needles in my back, and like pulled all the fluid out. And the doctor said, look, there's another liter of fluid around your heart. It's really serious. We are gonna like bring in the cardiologist tomorrow. We're gonna like, take care of this. And my parents were like, what's going on? And he said a bunch of doctor things, and then he said the word tumor. And my parents' face, they just went white. They just completely, just like, and the doctor left, and I asked my parents, I said, so, tumor, is that like cancer? And you don't think about, when you're 18 years old, the idea that you're sick and that would be something like cancer is just not something that ever enters your mind. Like, it's just not even something that you can conceptualize. And they just started crying. And so that led to a whole bunch of stuff. It turned out that I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, lymphoblastic, T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma. Not a good kind of cancer, particularly at the time. This is, almost 20 years ago now. And so, I needed chemo, I needed all this stuff, and that kind of started right away. They sent me out to another hospital. 2 weeks later, we found out that my mom had cancer too, completely different kind, just completely unrelated, just totally different. And my chemo was like, I was like throwing up all the time, right? I was losing tons of weight. It was really not fun, as I'm sure there are a few cancer survivors in the room know. And my mom's situation was much different. There was a decent chance that I could survive. It took a while to figure it out, but there was a very, very little chance that my mom was going to survive. There was nothing they could really do about it. It was extremely obscure cancer. But chemo was an option, right? Because they could prolong it. They tried to get her to do chemo. And she decided not to do it. And she said to me, she said, Jimmy, I'm just not as brave as you. So fast forward about 8 or 10 years, I couldn't breathe again. Same, not totally different reason. I had chemo and radiation, all that stuff, and it turned out that all of that treatment and stuff that had helped me survive cancer had sort of come back in like a very different way to like scarred all my lungs. So like I had gotten tons of like radiation treatments and whatnot, and over time that led to a fibrosis, a scarring of the lungs, and so I couldn't like walk up stairs or anything like that. So the cure had caused a new disease, right? And the only real option that we eventually found out was that I needed a lung transplant, a double lung transplant. It was a whole thing to make that happen, but it did. That's a lot of what the speech is about that John mentioned. But it happened, and the lung transplant surgery is extraordinary. It's like probably, my understanding is like the most complicated surgery there is, and mine was particularly complicated. So I literally had the best surgeons in the world doing this, thank God. And it was about a 8-10 hour surgery. I came out of it, and it was about a day before I was like really awake. And you're just like, all this like contraptions are like all over you, right? There's like these breathing things, and there was like, I couldn't actually talk it because there was all this stuff stuck in my throat to kind of come out and help me breathe. They would put these like machine things on my head. They would like, I have to like, pound my lungs to sort of get all the like flak and stuff like that was sort of left over from the surgery out. But I really struggled to learn how to breathe again. This is the thing that they don't like. There's no one that really knows how to teach someone who has had to kind of figure out this kind of really short way of breathing in order to sort of survive, how to start breathing again. Particularly, so they gave me all of these different contraptions to start to use, and they were awful, right? Like it was really difficult, and I wasn't succeeding at getting better. Like so, cancer. We talk about surviving, and the reason is because it's very difficult. But you basically just have to make it through it, right? And you just get hammered with all this stuff. And if you make it through it, then you survive, and that's where that word really comes from, about surviving. With a lung transplant, I had to fight. I had to fight really hard to like learn how to breathe again, to get better, because if I didn't, then it just wasn't going to work. And so it was really, really frustrating. I am a little bit of an overachiever, and so not being able to like do that successfully was really painful. And so we kept working out. My dad was sitting there, and then one day I just had this idea. I was like, Dad, there's all this like equipment like all up in here of like all these monitors and things beeping and stuff like that. But I couldn't see them. I said, Dad, can you turn some of these machines around so I can look at them? And so he did, and then I started to like play around with my breathing, watching as the little monitors and the numbers and the beeps started changing. And I eventually figured out how to make the numbers go up, like the good number go up, right, and the bad number go down, just by like how it was. I just kept doing that like over and over and over again, sort of turning it into a bit of a game. And it totally worked. Like that was how I got it. All the fancy contraptions, all the stuff, it didn't work, but just looking at, being able to see the number and sort of adjust my own behavior is what made it happen. And then my dad, he was there like all the time. He said, "You're the bravest person I know."
How long were you in the hospital?
I was in the hospital for that time about 6 weeks, I think. Yeah. And then there were sort of months later to get to sort of fully kind of get better. So I've got new lungs, right? It's like it's time to sort of like what is it I'm going to do with this? And so while I was waiting for the lung transplant, I realized that if I made it through this, I was going to have 3 different DNAs. The reason is because I had a bone marrow transplant back when I had the cancer, where they sort of give you someone else's bone marrow. And then the lung transplant, I had someone else's lung. So there's like literally going to be 3 different DNAs in my body. And I just kind of became sort of fascinated with this idea. And so I printed out this little card, and I wrote 3 DNA on it. And I put it on my computer where I could see it. I said, if I make it through this, like, I'm going to start that company. And I don't know exactly what that company is going to do, but it's going to do the thing that I've been trying to do, which is figure out how to like fix the world. It's kind of what we're all trying to do, right? And so I got out and I started to sort of figure out sort of how would they do this. And so I started. I left the job at Brave New Films. I started playing around with some different ideas, but the biggest thing was I started trying to figure out this story, right? How to tell this story. That's when I met Leah Indris. She's our chief of staff now at Nation Builder. And we started to sort of develop this story, which was what became that speech, The Internet is My Religion, this idea that that my story was a sort of a good way to sort of describe and articulate a worldview of what happens when everyone is connected. And I believed like really, really strongly that there was something there, something important, something that all of us feel, right, about how we're all connected and what that means for our future and what that means for what we can do together. But the idea of like, going on a stage and like presenting this to people and talking about it was utterly terrifying. Like I cannot even tell you, like it was they say that public speaking is like the most like scary thing, right? So, but this was like, I was totally convinced that if I went up there and said that, all of us connected are God, right, and the internet is our savior, right, that I would get like completely like, it would be blasphemy, right? People would like walk out, right? It was just going to be a total and utter disaster. But I had to do it. I just had to do it. And so I did it, and the complete opposite happened. Even people who I thought would be somehow offended by this weren't. They understood it. It really resonated with them, and it just kind of became this huge thing, and it led to so many other things. Nation Builder, we got, it was able to help sort of raise our profile. So Nation Builder got a lot of funding, and we've built a whole big company now. We have like 80 employees and doing all kinds of stuff. That's great. And so, I look back at those things, and I think like, the moments when, I got credit, right, for being brave didn't really feel like being brave at all. It felt like, look, yeah, like I want to survive. What am I supposed to do, right? I'm going to do whatever it takes, right? There's nothing brave about that, right? But then the thing, that seems sort of silly, this is like going up, standing in front of a bunch of people and sort of saying what I believe in. That was the hardest thing. That was the moment when I felt like I actually had to kind of muster courage. And what is the thing that connects those, right? And I think that the thing that connects those, right, is just conviction. Just believing in something so much, right? There's nothing you can do that's going to stop you from doing it. The thing that takes hold of you, the thing that you find, when you find that thing that you were meant to do, even if it's purely just living and purely just surviving, right? That like you will do like it just takes a hold of you. There's just nothing you can do to stop you from doing that thing. There's that phrase like the courage of your convictions. I think I know what that means now, right? And so, maybe sort of we're all creators here, right? Which is, amazing. And a lot of times the struggle is like, how do you have the courage to put your thing out into the world? That thing that that you care about, that's sort of really important to you, putting it out, letting people criticize it, letting people make fun of it, risking like all of that, risking failure. If you can't find that thing that you're willing to do that for, right? Maybe you don't believe in it enough. And maybe what you have to do is you have to find the thing that you just really, really, really believe in. And when you do, sometimes it means that like you can't do it by yourself. A lot of times it means you can't do it by, in fact, most of the time it means you can't do it by yourself. And that you need other people. And that moment when you realize that that thing that you were meant to do and that you need other people, that's the point when you become a leader. And I can tell you, like, this world, right, we have this horrible dearth of leadership. The political system is utterly broken. I don't even have to explain how it's broken, right? But the people in this room, the creators of the world, we have the opportunity, particularly when we connect with other people and we bring communities together, we can accomplish and we can fix so many of these problems. But it requires us to believe in something so much that we're willing to stand up, we're willing to sort of take all the hits, right, and put everything on the line to make it happen. And that's leadership, that's creating, and I believe that that's bravery. That's all I got.